Hey guys, today on JD Cars, we'll be swapping out these stock plastic fender flares for a set of EAG Jeep Wrangler JK stubby front fender flares with LED eagle lights. So the stock plastic fender flares on your Jeep JK do their job. They keep lots of mud from flying up on the Jeep here, as well as rocks and other debris, but I'm personally just not that much of a fan of the wide look. Also, the wideness of them hinders your off-road ability, and the durability just isn't there because they're made of plastic. I actually already damaged this one a little bit. As you can see, there's a gap right here. I made contact with a tree really slowly at crawling speed and it popped right off. So I'm looking for a bit more durability, a more stubby look, and more clearance for large wheels and tires coming in the future. So these EAG stubby fender flares should help me achieve that. As I say, for most of my installations, a lift is not necessary for this installation. You can do it right on the ground, but I will be pulling this in the garage and putting it on my Max Jacks lift just to better illustrate the process. Alright, I have the Jeep up on the lift here, ready to start the install. But first, let's tear into these fender flares because I'm really excited to see them and I'm sure you guys are as well. So let's get these puppies out of the box. So first thing we receive in the box is some instructions and some rubber stripping to go in between the fender flares and the vehicle. Next, we have a few brackets here and a smaller box. Let's see what's in there. So inside the smaller box is some mounting hardware. Appears to be all stainless steel, so that's wicked nice. And now the fender flares themselves. Take a look at this right one here first. Oh wow, look at that, beautiful. So these EAG stubby fender flares will fit all Jeep Wrangler JKs from 2007 to 2018. The edge has a square flat tube style with integrated LED marker lights. There's minor drilling required for installation, but as you can see, that will just be for a few of the mounting holes located on the inside lip here. The entire fender is coated in a textured black UV resistant powder coat finish. And looking at the inside of the fender here, you can see that it's very well welded and reinforced. Overall, these are looking really sweet and I'm really excited to get them installed on the Jeep here. So let's get going with the install. An optional step is to remove your wheel and tire to make accessing some of these fasteners a little bit easier. I'm not going to choose to do so because they're pretty easily accessible. I'll show you the position of the 5 10mm fasteners that we need to remove. One is a plastic fastener located in the back of the fender here. Then we have 3 metal 10mm screws located here, 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 and then one more 10mm screw up top on this bracket here. We also have 4 plastic grommets to remove, one located here, one here, one here, and finally one hidden back here. Before jumping into removing those fasteners, it is advisable to unplug this light here. So as you can see, if you follow your cable in, the connector is located just behind the front grille here. It's a quick release style plug. You need to press down on the tab and pull to release. So I'll be using my impact and a 10mm socket here to remove those fasteners. Also, the rivets you'll be removing will most likely break. They're not meant to be reused. So I'll have a link to this rivet kit down below. It's a 415 piece kit with a little chart here, and they include some rivet removal tools. I picked it up for 20 bucks on Amazon and it was well worth it. I've used it numerous times for the Jeep here. So I'll have links down below in the description. I found that I couldn't access this 10mm head on with my impact, so I attached this slim right angle adapter. I use it a lot for the Jeep here as well as on my BMW, so I'll have a link of one of these below as well. After removing those fasteners, the fender should be free to remove here. There are a couple pressure clips along the side here, and they do hold it on pretty tight, so you have to pull pretty hard to get it off. Use a plastic pry tool as to not damage your paint, and remove these remaining plastic clips. Now I want to lift the new fender flare onto the vehicle, get it into position here, and using a couple of the included bolts here, we're going to hold the fender flare in place. Now making sure that your edges are flush and your fender is fitted how you want it to. We're going to use a Sharpie to mark inside of these 3 holes located here, here, and here. You can now remove the fender flare from the Jeep Now in these 3 locations that we marked on the fender here, we're gonna have to drill a 3/8 inch hole. I'm gonna start off with a smaller bit here, just to drill a pilot hole so that we drill correctly. And I'll now come back in with my 3/8 inch bit. 2 holes we drilled down here will be the location for our smaller support bracket here, which as you can see, inserts into place and lines up with the 2 holes that we just drilled. We'll now need to mark these 2 inner holes here and again drill 2 3/8 inch holes to secure the bracket inside the fender here. I've inserted these 2 bolts here temporarily just to help line up the bracket. Now, as I always do, I'll give you a rundown of the hardware included here. We have 2 large support brackets and 2 smaller support brackets. They're gonna support the fender flare, just to beef things up. We have 8 of these big speed clips, 8 M8 by 1 screws, I believe, our 2 smaller support brackets, about 22 washers here, 20 of the serrated nuts, and 8 smaller ones of the same style. We then have 4 shorter M8 by 1.25 screws, and I believe it was 16 of these M8 by 1.25 screws that are a little bit longer, and then more of these M8 by 1 screws. So with our holes drilled, we can now insert the smaller support bracket right in here. Insert one of the shorter screws. Grab a washer and a flange nut and put it on the back side, and do the same in the lower hole as well. Now these fasteners are metric fasteners, so ideally you're gonna want a metric hex driver set. Unfortunately I didn't have the right size and most hardware stores don't have a metric set. So I just picked up this standard set, and the 7/32 bit should work just fine. Just gotta be careful not to strip these. So I have a 1/4 inch adapter on this socket here so that I can put it inside the fender and then stick my impact through the hole that we drilled to tighten this down. And then I'll be using a 13mm box wrench on the back to hold the nut. So that 7/32 bit worked just fine, but ideally you want metric bits, so I will have a link to a metric set down below. Now working with our driver's side larger reinforcement bracket here, we're going to install 4 of these speed clips, orient it with this flange facing downwards, and simply push it onto the bracket like so, or click into place. Do the same with the remainder. So we're gonna take this bracket and insert it in the fender like so. And you may have to play with your speed clips to get them to line up properly with these holes, but as long as they line up with the holes, you're golden. And then we'll take these smaller included screws and secure the bracket from underneath. So at this point we're ready to put the fender on the Jeep. However, I do want to make a quick note. I probably should have mentioned this a little earlier, but if you're planning to retain your stock plastic inner fender liners here, you are going to need to cut them and modify them in order to accommodate them with our new Stubby Fender Flares. You're basically going to have to make a cut along this line here, as these Stubby Fender Flares are shorter than the stock ones, and this inner fender liner is essentially part of the stock fender flare here. So if you're planning to keep these, you are going to need to cut them. You can just lay down a piece of masking tape and then use a Dremel, shears, really anything to cut this. It's pretty thin. The reason I won't be doing that today is because in our next Jeep episode, I'm going to be installing EAG aluminum inner fender liners. So I'm just going to proceed with installing these fender flares with no inner fender liners. But if you are proceeding with modifying your inner fender, they do provide you with instructions on how to do so. So don't worry too much about that. Now take our new fender flare and position it here on the car, and after placing the fender flare on the car here, there are just 2 fasteners we should focus on installing at this time. One all the way at the bottom here and one all the way at the front. So we'll use an M8 by 1.25 screw with 2 washers and a flange nut. And just barely hand thread those on at this time. You can install this one as well. Basically you just want maybe an 1/8 to a 1/4 inch gap here, and we're going to take our rubber strip included with the fender flares, and we're going to start it up at the front just shy of this fastener here and just work it into that gap. This will form a nice watertight seal, and it will also protect the paint of our Jeep. Once you get to the end here, you'll need to trim it, and we'll use the rest of it for the other fender flare. Once we have that rubber strip situated, we can continue to install the remainder of these M8 by 1.25 screws along the fender flare here. Now those shorter M8 bolts should be installed in these two holes. Unfortunately, my holes don't really line up here, so won't be installing them, but I'm not too concerned because it's very solid on here. All that remains to do now is to hook up our turn signal light here. I'm going to chop the stock connector off of our stock fender here, and I'll crimp that on to our new light. And that completes the installation of our front fender flare here. Now we're going to move on to the rear. So we should have similar stuff in our rear fender flare box here. We're going to have a set of instructions, of course, more rubber stripping, box of hardware, and then the fender flares themselves. Just like the front fender flares, the rear fender flares here have a beautiful textured black UV resistant powder coat paint job. Looks really good, feels really solid, it's got a lot of weight to it, so let's get to installing it on the car. The removal of the rear fender flare is considerably easier because this fender flare is only secured by plastic grommets, one located in the rear, one just ahead of it, two up top, and then two in the front here. So we'll again be using this metal grommet removal tool to pop those out and remove the rear fender flare. After removing those 6 grommets, we should be able to remove the fender flare here. So as I mentioned for the front fender flares, if you plan to retain your stock inner fender, you will need to trim it off. But like the front, I will be installing some EAG aluminum inner fenders, so I won't be cutting my stock fenders today. I'm just going to install the fender flares without any inner fenders. And once I get those inner fenders in, we'll install them on the next Jeep episode. So before we jump into installing our new fender flares, we should remove the remainder of these clips using a plastic pry tool. So for hardware, we've got some generic screws, flange nuts, and flat washers, but something a little bit different than the front fender installation is we're going to be installing these anchors. They're kind of similar to concrete anchors or drywall anchors. Basically, you insert them into a hole, then you use this spacer and bolt, you insert it in there, tighten it down while holding the spacer, and it will cause this to expand and lock into the car. So we'll be installing these in this hole here. We'll skip one, install one here, coming to the front. We'll install one just in front of this rubber grommet, and then we'll install one more in this hole right here. So I'll demonstrate the installation of one of these rivet nuts on this hole here. Basically, we take the rivet nut tool, put it onto the provided bolt. I'm gonna add this little rubber grommet here, and then we'll thread on the rivet nut all the way down against the rivet nut tool, and then insert it like so. And then using a 5/8 wrench, we're gonna hold the rivet nut tool still and use a 10mm socket, press in and turn the rivet nut at the same time here. You'll feel it beginning to grab and it won't be able to come out. Continue to apply pressure and turn this clockwise until it's firmly fit. Once your rivet nut is fully installed, simply use your 5/8, hold the rivet nut tool still, and your 10mm to back off the bolt. Alright, I'm not gonna lie, I'm pretty frustrated right now. These two holes line up, these two nut inserts that is, line up with the fender and the holes pre-drilled on the fender. I just held it up and there isn't even a hole here for this rivet nut. There's just no hole there on the fender flare, so can't even use that. I tried to install one here as they specified. The hole is clearly much larger than these holes and it just destroyed the rivet nut. A much better location would have been right here. I'm now down a rivet nut. I'm gonna have to run to the hardware store again. I'm gonna install a rivet nut down here and probably up here as well because can't even use that one, but that's just a little update. The fitment isn't 100% perfect, but we're gonna make it work and it's gonna be okay. All right, I got my rivet nuts sorted out. I still should probably run to the hardware store and get one more, but we're gonna get this installed tonight. So I'm gonna get the fender flare in place here and hold it in place with one of these bolts. I'm gonna pop in this other bolt here. All right, have these two installed. I'm gonna install a flat washer and a flange nut on the back. Just a couple turns, to be honest, just to barely get it threaded on there. Do the same over here. Because as with the front fender flares, we need to have a little bit of play here to insert a rubber strip. So I'm not gonna tighten these down quite yet. But first we need to install these skinnier screws into those rivet nuts that we installed in the rear fender here. Once you've got your fasteners installed, we once again need to install this rubber stripping. Start right down at the corner there, and we'll just work it in. Once you've fully installed the rubber stripping, we can tighten down our fasteners. And that completes the installation of our rear fender flare. So the driver's side of the Jeep here is complete in terms of our new fender flares, and the passenger side here is still completely stock with the plastic fender flares. I'm not gonna do these tonight because I believe my new aluminum EAG inner fenders should be arriving tomorrow. So I'll demonstrate that tutorial on this side so that I can show the process of removing the factory fender flares in preparation for the installation of new aluminum inner fenders. And then I'll be installing these new fender flares in addition to those aluminum inner fenders. So you won't see this thing fully completed until part 2 of this video. So definitely be sure to stay tuned for that. And while I don't even have the aluminum inner fenders yet, I would highly recommend checking them out and purchasing a set for installation before these stubby fender flares, because installing those aluminum inner fenders will actually make your life a lot easier. You won't have to trim down your stock fender flares or deal with modifying them whatsoever. It's completely bolt-on with no modifications, and then you can go ahead and install your new fender flares right over that. That being said, I'll lower this thing down, get it out into the driveway here, and get you some shots of the driver's side with these new fender flares because they do look really sweet. So I just have the Jeep flexing up on this tree in my front yard here, and I'm actually kind of glad that I only have one side on for the slow shots of the new fender flares, because this is actually a perfect example of when the stubby fender flares really shine. When you're flexing your Jeep, the stock fender flares really intrude on the clearance and articulation of your Jeep. In my case right here, it really isn't that big of a difference because my offset isn't terribly wide, so it theoretically would clear if it flexed further. But if I had any more offset or I flexed much further at all, I'd be making contact with my fender flare here and ultimately damaging the Jeep. So obviously we don't want that. We want the most clearance possible. We want the most durability possible. And that's what these new EAG stubby fender flares offer. They offer much more clearance, much more durability, and honestly, I think they look a lot better. I'll back the Jeep up and flex it up with the right tire on the tree so that we can see the adverse effect on the driver's side here. All right, I have the right side flexed up now. Tore up the lawn a bit just so you guys know the extents I go to make these videos. And as you can see, the new stubby fender flare is really doing its job. Look at this. I can stick my whole hand in here, opposed to the other side, I could maybe fit 2 fingers in there. This has a lot more clearance. The Jeep can flex all the way up to the top of the fender well, and it's just really obvious and undeniable that these new stubby fender flares offer a lot more clearance for off-roading, and let's admit, come on, they look a lot better. Also just noticed another thing I like about these stubby fender flares as I was putting the Jeep away. A little off-roading in the yard here, but look at, you can see the tire so much more now when making turns. And even when you're going straight, you can see so much of the tire. I think it looks really cool. I think that looks awesome. And the same thing in the rear. You can see the tires. I think it looks really cool. Definitely adds an aggressive look to the Jeep here. So that's gonna wrap up this video on these EAG stubby fender flares. Other than a few minor fitment issues, I'm very happy with the set of Fender Flares. It was a little tight, but to be honest, to make a part that fits 11 years worth of vehicles, there is going to be very slight variation in the different years of production, so I can't complain. The fitment came out great in terms of the edges here, and they're very solid. I can shake the entire car, so I'm very happy with them. I hope you guys enjoyed. Please leave a like below. It really helps me out with these projects, and be sure to subscribe for more Jeep content, and tune in next time for part 2 of this video, where we're going to be installing EAG aluminum inner fenders. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time on JD Cars.